Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to the Transportation Committee meeting. We are going to be calling to order Wednesday, March 9th at 4:05 p.m. the Annapolis Transportation Committee meeting. Can I have a roll call of members? Looks like I have all members present.
Yes.
Sorry about that. All members present. Next on our agenda is approval of the agenda. And I have four addendums to add to that. We have public testimony from Bill Reichardt and Jake Iverson, as well as Ms. Madison, and Director Duell would like to be added to the agenda. Can I have a motion for the approval of the agenda with the amendments?
So approved.
Second.
So moved. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from 2/9/22. I have a motion to approve the minutes from 2/9/22.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Minutes approved.
No. But we need a vote on that, though.
Oh. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I don't hear any opposition.
I'm good. Thank you. Yes.
Next up on our agenda is legislation O-40-21. I'd like to start this portion of our agenda with public testimony from Bill Reichardt. Is he available?
I'm here, Madam Chairman. Can you hear me?
Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to members of the Transportation Committee. I'm Bill Reichardt, President of the Eastport Civic Association, and I'm testifying on behalf of the ECA and in conjunction with the Ward 1 Residents Association, or WARA. As you know, we submitted, both the ECA and the Ward 1 Residents Association submitted extensive written testimony in advance of this meeting, and I hope you had an opportunity to read that more detailed document. The ECA and WARA encouraged the City Council's Transportation Committee to consider an amendment to O-40-21. First of all, let me be clear as to what our organizations support. First of all, we support the transformation of Annapolis transit vehicles to electric over time, prioritizing a more extensive, inclusive, and equitable e-transit system into the communities that most need them. We support a comprehensive feasibility study by the city of all e-vehicles, the funding for which is proposed in the fiscal year 22 budget request. We support the use of existing e-boats operating in Annapolis to offer public transportation for passengers and bicycles to multiple locations on the waterfront throughout Annapolis. What we oppose is that the city proceed at this time with a financial commitment for the city-owned e-ferry before the comprehensive feasibility study is conducted. And there are many reasons why the funding to buy the e-ferry should not be authorized in fiscal year 22. The comprehensive feasibility study should occur first, before deciding whether a city-owned e-ferry is needed and where it would go. We use the word comprehensive feasibility study, and the word comprehensive is thrown around a lot these days by people who are asking for something. But in our view, comprehensive means inclusive. It means looking at numerous factors will come to play on this, as far as mobility and transportation, particularly in the changes that are now occurring on the Eastport Peninsula. Maintaining the operation, the maintaining and the operation of Annapolis-wide transit system is crucial for residents across all wards, especially during the time that the Hillman Garage revenues will stress the city's transportation budget, and that should be the priority. The city's Maritime Advisory Board, which held 2 public meetings on O4021, decided not to recommend the e-ferry to City Council because the proposed boat will not be certified by the U.S. Coast Guard, and at least 2 boats will be required for uninterrupted operation of a ferry service. The video of that board's thoughtful questions, discussions, and reasonings can be viewed on the city's YouTube channel, and I think we sent you a link to that YouTube video. The water taxi company in Annapolis has electrified several of its boats and will electrify its entire fleet. It can easily transport both passengers and bikes to multiple waterfront locations throughout Annapolis, and the city has identified this company as its partner for the e-ferry. And I think you're going to hear this afternoon from Mr. Iverson in that regard. The centerpiece of the proposed e-transit system should be the transition to city-owned e-buses, e-circulator, and e-trolleys, e-cruisers, and an e-charging station for e-vehicle drivers, which reach many more Annapolis residents and visitors across all wards, not a single city-owned e-ferry. Finally, the lead time to order the proposed e-ferry has shortened, and there is a long lead time to order other land-based e-vehicles. Yet and those items are proposed for appropriation in fiscal year 23. Therefore, and finally, we ask the Finance Committee to propose an amendment to O4021 to change the requested funding for fiscal year 22 so that only the $100,000 for a comprehensive feasibility study is put in the CIP for FY22. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Next up, Jake Iverson, public testimony.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. My name is Jake Iverson, president of Watermark, 980 Awald Road, 21403. Mr. Mayor, City Manager, Aldermen and women, thank you for letting me speak on O-40-21, Electric Mobility Plan. I support the electric mobility plan and do see electric transportation as our future. The electric bus, trolleys, carts would provide a green way to get around the city. And I also think electric boats for water transportation is also important and a way of the future. I do feel the vessel portion should be left to the professional mariners that have served the city for almost 40 years at no cost to the city. Watermark has been exploring and testing battery-powered vessels for almost 2 years and have learned quite a bit. This is a process that should not be rushed. If the mobility plan were to be passed as it is written today, the proposed ex-shore vessel would not be able to operate with passengers on board for 3 years, according to the Jones Act. I do propose that the city works with Watermark to build and design a boat that is more sustainable and useful to support the city's vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake. In our room, we have Mayor Gavin Buckley. And I forgot to welcome you earlier. Welcome. Thank you.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I appreciate Mr. Reichardt's opinion. I want to know when Eastport voted on this. I have very many friends who live in Eastport who didn't get a chance to vote on this, so I'd like a copy of that vote that the Eastport Civic Association did. I'm a member of Ward 1. I'd like a copy of the vote that was taken at Ward 1, because I really don't think this has been brought to the membership. If I'm wrong, that's okay, but that I think you can't stand up there and say you speak for an organisation unless you have consulted the entire membership. I am not going to purchase a Swedish-made ferry if it doesn't pass the test. So people can put their opinions forward on this forum, and that is their opinions. We have found a way to fund this. We want to keep this plan intact. It has been earmarked by Senator Ben Cardin. Why it's attractive to our federal partners and why an out-of-the-box idea like this will attract people like Pete Buttigieg to come to Annapolis and see our operations is because we're doing something different. Now, it has to pass all the tests. We will make sure that we don't spend $1 of the city's money on this ferry, this boat, and we are looking at other technologies, but the time is now. So we have got a commitment for $250,000 from the county. We are earmarked for $2 to $3 million for this 100% electric plan from Senator Cardin. We think it is something new. We want this city to be a leader, and it's not just about this boat being a ferry. This is a small vessel that can work with electrification of transportation on the water, but we also see this as a potential replacement for the harbour master vessels. I want our harbour master, to be the first 100% electric operational harbour master's office in the country. We think with 3 or 4 vessels that we have, that goal is attainable, but we have to work with a vessel and learn through that process. This is part of the process. And this is not going to cost the taxpayers money, because I promised you that I would find grants to work on this, and I would share the experiment with the county and with the state. We hope our state partners can come through, but if they can't, our federal partners will come through. And we won't make any acquisitions of a vessel without knowing that it meets the criteria that we need. So I urge you to keep the plan intact, not jeopardize the funding that is promised to us. And the process will involve all of us as we go through design phases and determine needs. I see the perfect partner for this experiment is Watermark. Watermark should be the operators of this vessel. Maybe this vessel is not perfect for Watermark's needs as we progress, but it is a good way for them to test inboard electrification. The electrification they've been working on is outboard, and I saw the models they were using, and they're interesting. There's a great local company that produces those outboard engines, but they don't have the range for what we need. We know the European technology is far more advanced than what exists in the States today. But having said that, it's still not stopping me going with Jake to Baltimore to see where the Baltimore taxis are being built and looking at that technology. It's not going to stop our harbour master testing the technology to see if it's compatible. We need to be leaders. This is the time is now. I'm asking you not to dissect the plan. I'm going to deliver on what I said, and people are going to have different opinions, but I can give you a whole bunch of different opinions as well. And I know that this plan has strong support in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Buckley. I appreciate that. I'm going to now open it up to committee discussion. If there's committee members that have questions, comments. Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I have a number of thoughts on this. I really do want to commend the mayor for sticking his neck out on this and really, putting us in the forefront. Because I haven't heard of any place around the country who is trying to do this. Maybe even around much of the world. I think that it does make us very unique. And so, I think it's really important for us to do this, to implement the plan and this goal that's being put out there. My only concern and questions with it are really just the process in terms of how we get to that point. Because it seems like, because I'm just comparing this to some of the other projects. I've put in a request for, just as an example, for a crosswalk and for sidewalk improvements in parts of my ward. And that's, it's been, the process for that has been, the city takes a deeper look at what's needed exactly, and then they put it in the CIP. And I just feel like with this project that we need to be clear with what's going to be looked at during the planning process, because the way it's currently worded in the appendix is that it's kind of, we're doing everything at once in terms of the planning, feasibility, and then actually the boat purchase. And for me, as much as I support the goal, that just, I can't help but to feel a bit uncomfortable with some of the process because I just don't understand. There are a lot of unknowns, which I think is what is making me a bit uncomfortable. Just as an example, should we be, because I think there are a lot of alternatives in terms of how we do this. Like, should we put this out for an RFP so others can provide proposals to us and something that people would bid on in terms of providing these services to us? Should we create a grant so we can help give that money to some of the local partners to shift to electric? Or should we do it ourselves like is being proposed and include some kind of partnership? But there are a lot of kind of questions with how to proceed on this, because just thinking about the boat itself, if we purchase a new boat, what's going to be, who's going to be doing the maintenance? Is that something where I'm just thinking, as an EV owner with my Tesla, I can take it to a service center, which is up near Baltimore. There are a couple near DC, but they also come if there are certain issues with the car. So if we get a boat, do we know if this is something where people will, the manufacturer will come and provide those services? Because I think that's a big unknown. It may influence what kind of boat we end up getting. And similar to that, what kind of infrastructure do we need? Or does the boat need? Is it going to use proprietary chargers? Because even for cars, there are a couple different charging types. I think that really depends on what kind of boat we end up getting. I think, and then there's also, as was raised by the ECA in terms of some of these other entities locally who have started to get into EVs. So I'm just not clear in terms of if we could partner with them. And the other infrastructure issues that I think could be looked at in more of a feasibility study would be where exactly we want to do the drop-off points. Is there any kind of parking that needs to be improved with that? Do we need to dredge to make sure they're deep enough? It just seems like a lot of these things which I feel like we're, I don't know. I guess I'll just stop there. Do we have any answers to those kind of concerns?
I mean, I have answers to that, but I just want to point out the crosswalk is a great example, right? We put a crosswalk on Chesapeake next to Bakers & Co. We didn't put the permanent crosswalk there, but we put a crosswalk and we put bump outs there. And now we've had that in operation for close to a year, and then we've learned stuff from that process. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. We will learn stuff from the process. We will share the cost of this. And I didn't forget to mention last time that there is a huge equity piece here. You know, I have a deep desire to make sure that there's water access in this city. And this is another level of water access that's never been offered. So we could pay Watermark to run this ferry, but we could run a free route from Eastport, from 5th Street to City Dock. And so that's another level of water access that's never, ever happened in the city before on this basis. Sorry, David, I cut you off.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes.
May I speak? Okay, thank you. So I think everybody agrees that we need to do a study. There is no argument whatsoever. That's why we put $100,000 in for the first year is to start that study. The four things and we talked about this at Finance Committee as well, the four things that we need to look at are, number one, what do we expect the demand for this service going to be? Because that's going to inform everything else about how this is going to work based on what the demand is going to be. So it's almost going to be like a business case analysis to see what sort of demand we would expect. And then based on that, we need to look at the parking and traffic impacts, as Alderman Savage said, and what the options are on both sides for parking, especially on the Eastport side. The third thing would be what the operations and maintenance costs are going to be, what the needs are going to be. We fully intend to partner with Watermark. We met with Watermark back on December 10th. I did personally in the conference room to start discussions of this. Mr. Iverson and Debbie Gavin were in that meeting just to start to discuss and start to put together ideas on how that all would work. And then last, but certainly not least, is the infrastructure needs. Again, as Alderman Savage mentioned, the infrastructure needs, sort of a concept design, what the dock would look like on the Eastport side, where that would be located, charging, maintenance, so forth. So that absolutely has to be done. The reason why we put the ferry in the first year is because that's such a long, at least when we were putting this together, that was an extremely long lead time item. And that's even become longer because now we have to do a sourcing study to see what the best alternative is for the boat. So in doing that, it's advantageous to have sort of money in your back pocket when you start talking to these people about, what the boats might look like, and if it's going to be a custom-built boat, to have some money to start those discussions. So that's why we put this together. That's why in the FY22 budget, we asked for $100,000 for the planning process and $330,000 for equipment. That was specifically for the ferry. And again, from the long lead time, the FY23 money is for the land-based equipment. And again, that has a fairly long lead time as well, but just not as long as an electric boat. So that was the thinking of how this was structured.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I ask
Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just following up on that, I guess to either of you, it just seems like, I don't know, I'm just not fully, I guess I don't fully understand yet the need to have the boat. It just seems like it'd be a bit more palatable to certain segments of the public, and even to myself at least, and I don't know about the rest of the council, but if we could split it up a little bit to say, because we only have, frankly, 3 months left in this fiscal year, which is what this amendment or ordinance would amend anyway. But if we just have it be different phases, so the first phase is doing more of a feasibility study, and then we could probably do that in, I imagine, a couple months, and then for next year's budget, we could either right from the get-go or amend it down the line to include the phase 2, which is actually putting a down payment on some kind of boat. But it just seems like there's still a lot of questions out there, at least in my mind, in terms of the what kind of electric charging infrastructure, but also what kind of boat support would be needed for this. I mean, would that be a big? I guess I'm trying to understand. Would that? I guess to the mayor, Mr. Mayor, do you think that would be too? Would that get in the way of what you're trying to do? Because I certainly don't want to do that, but I'm trying to find some kind of happy medium here between getting some more information for the public, but also for ourselves before we go to the next phase.
I mean, I'm asking you to keep the plan together, and I'm asking you to trust us that we won't make acquisitions without ticking all the boxes. And our city manager is an expert at that. And we have reached out to our federal partners with this plan in whole. We have answers for that. If let's just say that everything passed on the ex-shore boat, it can do a whole day of operations without going back to a charging station. So it can charge overnight. If the electric circulator was available to us tomorrow, we have a route that the electric circulator does that it could do in one charge in one whole day. So we don't need specific infrastructure. It can go back to the bus station at the end of the night. And then the 10-minute trolleys, they are housed at the Knighton garage, and they could be housed at the Gotts garage. So when they run out of charge, you can go straight to those garages and swap out a 10-minute trolley and then keep the circulation going. So we have everything we need now to make it happen. Now, if we don't get the delivery of the boat, if we find a better boat and it takes a longer time, then that money won't get spent. But please listen, I am going to get it grant funded, right? It is going to be grant funded. And I feel like we should do that. We should take the grants now when all this money is coming down federally for transportation. And people with a plan are going to get the funding. We are going to get the money from Cardin, maybe I think the whole amount, and we won't even, well, we can reuse the $250 from the county, but I don't want to jeopardize that. It is still on a supplemental ask in the state. I've gone to multiple sources to make sure that we have a surplus of money for this experiment, right? And I know for a lot of people it seems whatever. But, I want this city to be a leader, and, being a leader, sometimes it means you have to go first and take some risks, but we have the people in place to make sure we can mitigate those risks.
Thank you. Alderwoman Pendel-Charles, and then Alderman Gay.
Alderman Savage, did you finish, or did you have something else you wanted to add?
Well, I mean, I just wanted to add, I hear what you're saying. I just think that even spending a few months to put together more of a plan. I mean, we have a goal, but I think it's a stretch to say we have a plan. We don't have the details, which I think would make, again, a lot of the public and us comfortable. And I think if we include some of the framework for that in this ordinance, in the budget, in the current budget, I mean, is there harm to splitting it out if it helps build more consensus around this idea? And I mean, because I'm thinking when you put forward true applications for grants, you have to have a pretty fleshed out plan to win and secure that money. So I think it would help us. It would help us get any kind of money, but also help us, I think, with the community to flesh this out a bit more. I mean, I'll save some of my other technical questions for later on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderwoman Pendel-Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to kind of go through a series of things that I'm hearing. Number one, I can certainly relate to Alderman Savage regarding the unknowns. And I guess with any experiment, as the mayor has explained, there are going to be some unknowns. But listening to our city manager, who has outlined the 4 prongs that we're taking a look at, at this point, I feel comfortable, and I'll tell you why. I'm very encouraged by the federal partners that we have. On a personal note, whenever I have a Ward 3 issue, I go to our federal partners, and inside of a half hour, I have a solution. I've been extremely impressed with Senator Cardin's office, Senator Van Hollen's office, and Congressman Sarbanes' office. So much so, and just as a side note, I referenced them on my campaign literature because I thought it was well worth it. When our federal partners and our fellow legislators do well, I think we need to point that out. So when we aren't so happy, then it's not a problem if we point that out. With that being said, I think our inauguration was a great opportunity for our federal legislators to be here. They were all here. They could hear. I think they got the gist of some of the things and opportunities that we will be moving forward on. And I'm sure since that time, I'm going out on the limb and saying that our mayor has certainly advised them as to some of the things that we as a city need to move on. And I think whenever there's an opportunity, because we know there's always a small window of time when we need to get this going, especially when it comes to our federal legislators, that we need to move in that space as quickly as we can. So I think that's a plus for me. The other thing is too, as a recently retired employee from Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and I was in the equity office, that was my last stint. I'm starting to look at things more within an equity lens. And as your public safety chair for your council, when I couple the equity lens with public safety, I'm looking at our children and our youth and what has gone on in our city, especially over the past month, that we need some innovative, creative, and yes, we're gonna have to put some money to it, opportunities for our children. And I want that component added to this list that Mr. Gerald has had given us today. I think that needs to be front and center. Whatever we can do for our children and our families, whatever experiences and opportunities that we can provide to them, whether it's on the water, whether it's on the land, or whether it's in the air. I think that is something that we need to put some money to. We oftentimes talk the talk, but we need to walk the walk as well. So that's very important to me. And with all that being said, I'm willing to take an experiment. That's a word we use in the school system a lot, whether it's science experiments or social experiments. But I think we need to do justice for our children and our families and those who have no water access, never been on the water. I think this is an opportunity, but I wanted that component, the equity component, the outreach component added to this. How is this going to help our children and our neighborhoods to give them experiences and all that they desperately need? Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Findell Charles. Next up, Alderman Gay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak. I admittedly was following this very closely at the Finance Committee meeting. It was disappointed I couldn't attend, but I was in the background. I'm so glad to have the opportunity to speak before we get it before the council. I just had a couple of quick questions either for the sponsor or the committee. Just from hearing and reading through the staff report and the fiscal note that's attached. The first question being, the multi-year plan will create a fully electric transit system in the downtown Annapolis and Eastport area. Has there been an attached route or PDF. Have we had access to that? Could you shed some light on that? Maybe what it would look like and what communities it will touch?
Mayor
Can I
Buckley.
speak to that? Thank you.
Yes.
So for Eastport and as close to your waters, we get the 10-minute trolley. We'll leave from a transportation hub at 5th Street or some charging capacity there. If that is, what we come up with when we design. But I see 5th Street, that block, to be a transportation hub, a place where there are electric bikes, electric scooters, electric charging stations, and electric charger for the 5th Street ferry. I also, in the shopping center plan, there is a transportation hub in that design that we are requiring that development to do. So there'll be a 10-minute trolley that will leave and do 10-minute loops down Chesapeake from the shopping center, going past multiple parking assets as it makes its way towards the peninsula. And then it will circle back round on Bay Ridge Avenue and then cut back up to the shopping center. Now it can take deviations on that area because it makes that 10-minute loop pretty fast, and I've done it a few times. So if we wanted to jet off a little bit and get to the corner of Jefferson and Madison or something like that, that is up to us. The design I've done now, and I think the shopping center is pretty conveniently located for a lot of housing in that area. It's close to Harbour House, it's close to Watergate, and the residences behind that. So I think that loop is one loop. The other loop is the 10-minute trolley in the historic district, and that will be stationed on Calvert Street, where there are 3 parking assets: the state garage at St. John's, the county garage, and the GOTS garage, the city's garage. It will go past St. John's, around the State House, down Cornhill, and then I want it to cut through an alley and then come back up West Street, Main Street, and then that can do a 10-minute loop as well. And then the circulator currently goes from Park Place to the waterfront. I think as a group we could take a look at that once we get all the things kinked out, ironed out after the garage comes down. But once we get through a few months of that trial, I believe we could expand the circulator to do 1 stadium stop and then 1 grocery store stop at Growls. And that grocery store stop on Growls would mean going down Taylor, turning at the DNR building, and then going to Roe Boulevard on that curved street that goes past DNR and the courthouse. It could hit Roe Boulevard and then turn left back again down Taylor. So that would give access to a grocery store to multiple people, and access to the stadium for multiple people. So just extending it a little bit past Park Place, I think would be a nice equity adjustment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we keep mentioning equity because I think that's important for me, as the Alderwoman mentioned, is important for her as well if this project was to move forward. On that note, as you mentioned, there would be room to wiggle as it relates to the routes. I'd love to have a conversation there because I think even investing in the infrastructure that it would take to create a transit hub near the community, you mentioned Jefferson and President intersection or wherever, I think that would create access to the downtown area that is currently not existent. And that's only a hope. I don't think that overnight, diversity will change in the downtown area significantly, or there'll be a boom in, just a change in the social scene. But I think it'll create opportunities, and that's the first step. My fear, while still associated with equity is how does this interface with the current transit system, and maybe some of the lack of investment and maybe the bigger vision that we've had there, and expanding the routes and improving the existing infrastructure that they use, how does it interface to that? And can we see improvements in our actual transit system that would benefit more low-income communities while at the same time working with this system?
If I could just jump in really quickly and let Jackie Gold talk to you. I'm so glad that you asked that question, Alderman Gay. We've had a very exciting meeting with BG&E on a grant proposal that they are very interested in partnering with us. And not only would that grant proposal give us a transportation hub exactly where you're talking, in the community where it's needed the most, but also they proposed entering into arrangement with us for a $1 lease of their electric buses that they are no longer using. So there's a lot of details to go into that, but this to me all leads to the long range plan. You know, we work on the internal plan and we say, if you get out of your car in Annapolis, any transportation that only stays within the city boundaries is 100% electric. You've come to Annapolis and you've done something good for the Bay. You've moved around, it's fun, it's exciting, and it's going to get people more interested in public transportation. And we know the county executive is a priority for him as well. We know that the big money grants that are coming from the federal government are for low emissions or no emissions transportation. So we think that is going to be priority funded as well. But in the interim, Jackie, just talk about the meeting you had with BG&E, sorry.
Okay, yes, I'm so glad you asked that question, Alderman Gay, because you were on my list of people to call today. Now I don't have to do that. We just spoke with BG&E yesterday about a RAISE grant, which is Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. And it's a grant program under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, federal government money. So, and this particular grant falls under their local regional project assistance program. So what the RAISE grant does is it funds energy efficiency, climate change mitigation projects, and includes around multimodal mobility. And there's a particular area you can apply to for equitable multimodal hubs, is what they're called. And these are to serve primarily low income and disadvantaged communities. There is the federal government grant is 80% and there's a 20% match. However, if you meet the criteria for historically disadvantaged communities, then that 20% match can be reduced if it's not entirely eliminated. And that, of course, is what we would apply for. So with some of the highlights would be that there would be a EV charging area that could be located probably in the Harbor House area, because that's larger than the Eastport Terrace area, but to serve those communities primarily. And you might think, well, there's not a lot of low-income people with EV cars yet, I would say. There's a growing market for used EV cars, and part of this would be to provide public education and connections to that market. But also, part of the proposal would be to consider including a car share EV for that neighborhood, and we could put into the grant the operational costs so that we could provide that service free of charge to the community. And also we could consider recruiting community members for Lyft drivers and other workforce development add-ons, such as hiring for take-home fleet drivers in the neighborhood and developing a charger maintenance workforce development program. As Mayor Buckley mentioned, we could also add in the lease of $1 a month for one of BG&E's Proterra buses that they're no longer using. That could be part of the circulator transportation network to connect those disadvantaged communities to other areas of Annapolis and other parts of our transit system. But if they're too large for the circulator system, we could use them on other bus routes. And the idea is to use them to connect neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods, with areas of job opportunities and recreation. So that's kind of a nutshell of what that grant would look like. And I spoke with Melissa Maddox-Evans today about locating such a multimodal equitable hub in those properties. And I'm also speaking with our Department of Transportation about it. So this is evolving right now, and I can answer any other questions about it.
Thank you.
That's so great to hear. I just have one last question, Carmen, actually, if possible.
Of course.
Just related to the water opportunities, but Jackie, that was so great to hear, and I definitely would hope to follow up with that. I'm still lost, and I will, I guess, turn it over to the chair to the financing plan for this. I'm under the impression that majority of it will be handled through grants, with only $130,000 in total, I'm assuming, coming from the city to go towards the project. My question, because I've seen the watermark testimony as well, are there other opportunities outside of the electric boat that we could explore to get involved in water transit? You know, like I think of like the little paddle boats, or, you know, just a number of ways to get people involved or on the water that maybe would not compete directly with their business plan or model. Has that been considered? I remember when I went to Houston once, and they had like a pond. They didn't have like water like we did, but they had a large pond, and everybody was thrilled to pay $25 to get on like the bike that rides across the water, or the little canoes. Or so have those opportunities been explored outside of just the actual boat? And that's my last question.
I'm not sure about all of the activities, but I can tell you I've talked with a couple of organizations recently about providing, if the organizations would perhaps provide like vouchers for the downtown water taxis and or the kayak company that operates out of downtown. If some of these organizations would provide those through the visitor center, so that we could talk to our city residents and say, here's some opportunities. It has nothing to do with transportation, but the Classic Theater of Maryland is doing just that. They have members that purchase season passes. And if the member doesn't choose to use a ticket for the season pass, they can give it to, for instance, in this case, it's to the organization Creating Communities. And Creating Communities gives that ticket, or that set of tickets to a member of their, Creating Communities, or somebody that would really benefit or enjoy that. I think we could do the same with some of the other things that are going on the water. And I will stop talking because I believe there were like 4 people that raised their hands. Alderman Pindell Charles had her hand up first, I believe, and then Alderman Savage.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to reiterate about the equity lens. Mr. City Manager, can you add that to that 4-component list that you gave us?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you add what Jackie Ms. Guile has given us in response to Alderman Gay's question?
Yeah, I think that is actually an initiative that's moving ahead, in addition to or separate from this initiative. But I think it is important, and we're happy to provide more information about that. But I don't think that would be part of this project, but it certainly is noteworthy.
No, it's separate from they would connect to it and supplement it, but it's separate from the mobility plan.
I think it's very important for, I guess, looking beyond even what we're talking about today, to have some caveat placed there. I think it's extremely important, because people, just like Alderman Gay asked the question, I think it hooks into and can connect to that. So I would appreciate it that if there's at least a couple sentences about what Ms. Guile has presented to us today, and that kind of gives it a longer lasting approach to what we're trying to do. Does that make sense? I think it answers other questions.
Yeah, we can certainly add that to the report that will come out, from this study, that there's that whole other piece that's being considered.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Guile, you said you had a question today, a conversation today with the Annapolis Department of Transportation. Is that correct?
No, I forwarded them the information. I haven't been in contact yet with them about it. This whole grant opportunity with BG&E just came to my attention yesterday morning. We had a conversation with BG&E yesterday because they would support the city in putting together the grant and help with the electrification and infrastructure end of it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And I said I spoke with HACA today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Savage and then Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to ask that question again on the boat part of it. Do we have any information? Well, have you set on a particular manufacturer? And if you have, do you have information about the servicing capability?
So we've been looking for a boat because I've sort of seen a boat that's operational in the south of France. But when the boat show came here, the Swedish boat presented itself. We hadn't seen any kind of technology like that. We hadn't seen a compatibility like that with boats. So this company is very interested in the American market. They are going to just ship hulls and assemble here. We want that to be an Anne Arundel County facility in the long term. We think that if we can lure this company to the area and not let them go to Newport, and this is a much better and much more centrally located area for that. The David Taylor Center would be a dream, but somewhere in this area, it would make a big statement about who we are and what our priorities are. Now, this company warranties the boat. They're very concerned they want to make sure that this comes out of the gate and that Annapolis is the model for the country. So we will get a lot of support from this company, and also the idea of electrification in cars and in boats especially is very limited moving parts. So when we put all the parts on the boat here, they are parts that are installed in America. They're parts that the installation companies are familiar with. So we have the service that comes, the back of house service that comes with that installation. The fabrication of the gates for the back of the boat would be done here. But I want to point out, we will not purchase that boat, and our deposit will be refunded if it can't meet the criteria that we need. And along with that, I will be looking at in other places, but I have been looking for a while, and I haven't seen anything that has that. Now, we can custom make a boat. I know that Jake is working on customizing an electric water taxi with an inboard engine that I think it has a 18-month or 24-month lead time on that. I'm not sure if he's placed an order or anything for that, but he has been looking at it. So it will have the service. The charging costs are very limited. The maintenance costs are very limited, obviously, in the first year because they're covered with warranties. And then the operation cost, I believe, can be shared with some of the 800 or 900,000 that we've set aside for mobility during the Hillman Garage reconstruction. And then after the end of the pilot, we can make a decision whether we move a vessel, if we have got one, to our harbour master, or whether the numbers that it's produced have shown that this is a popular concept. I think it'll be a very popular concept. And I don't think it's just for tourists. I think it's for families that live in Annapolis. If any of you have tried to ride a bike across the Eastport Bridge with your kids, it is deadly. But I definitely would come to the 5th Street Ferry and roll on with my family and roll off at City Dock.
So regarding just to dig into that a little more, I think what you say kind of speaks to the point that this might be better served going out to bid. If we put this out to bid in some fashion, we could say, because there are other manufacturers. There's a company called Duffy which manufactures boats that look a lot like the one that Watermark uses. And they have a couple different models, larger, 22-foot. They've, looks like capacity down in Florida, but also California. But if we put this out to bid, we can say, look, we're soliciting bids for a manufacturer to be designing or providing their existing boat, right, tweaked to our specifications to us, the capital city of Maryland. And along with that, we want information on what your servicing capability requirement is going to be. And hey, maybe we can get them to throw in EV charging facility for this. But, you know, those are the kind of things I think which could be fleshed out more if we just take a bit more time to develop more of a proposal plan for this.
Could I just say, Alderman Savage, you cannot roll a wheelchair onto a Duffy boat. You cannot roll a wheelchair onto the water taxi. So they do not have the same capability of the boat that has an open transom on it and that can back up to a floating dock. So I would like to make that point, that the design of something has to be compatible with roll on and roll off. Thank you.
So is this something that we I just like the question more for the city manager, is this something that we will be putting out to bid in some fashion, or are we required to if the cost is over a certain amount for the particular boat?
That's a great question. I mean, if you look at our contracting regulations, the answer would be yes.
I mean, if we need to do this anyway as a part of the this whole proposal, then I mean that's good. It's good to know. I don't think it undermines the goal for this at all. But I think that's important for the public to know as well, if that's a process we need to follow anyway.
There would be a single source potential, Mr. City Manager, if the technology or wasn't available anywhere else, or the style that we need to meet our needs. Is that a possibility or not?
Yeah. So that would be a decision of the procurement officer if there were no other sources available, or if that one source was, you know, the best advantage to the city. But those determinations would have to be made.
I'm going to just have to leave because I've got to go to a 5 o'clock. I want to say thank you for listening. I'm sorry to put everybody to so much work. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Mayor Buckley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're not sorry.
So I guess some of my other questions, I guess, go to the city manager and deputy city manager at this point. Another question about the boat. I mean, have we looked into this to a point where we know how long the charge, like what's our goal in terms of how long we need this boat charge to last? Because, for example, we need to know whether or not, will it be able to run all day, or do we need to have two boats we swap out during the day? You know, so yeah, that's the first question.
So when we test drove the boat with the mayor, I don't recall exactly how many hours of charge it had, but it easily could run all day without a charge. So with excess left over. So this boat could charge overnight when it wasn't being used. So we would only need one to start with.
Good to know. Okay. And yeah, just to emphasize again, especially if we end up going with one boat, I think we really need to have that service be a part of that. Because I know we had all these issues with the hybrid boats, which granted are more complicated. I mean, I've had my EV for over 2 years now, I think. And I've had to bring it for service, zero. No, not at all. So they're very reliable, more reliable than gasoline. But if you do have issues pop up, we don't want to be out of the boat. And so going to the trolleys, I know there have been, at least for me, questions on the boat. For the EV trolleys, are we just talking about swapping out the circulator trolley, or are there additional supplemental smaller EVs that we would be incorporating into this.
Oh, sorry, City Manager Gerald.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so there's two parts to that. So the circulator itself would just be a swap out to have an electric circulator. But then there's smaller vehicles, the smaller, like 6-passenger golf cart type vehicles that would run from the end of the route for the circulator to the docking spot for the electric ferry. So the 10-minute trolley that the mayor was talking about will be those smaller electric carts.
Who would operate?
One on either side. One on the downtown side, one on Eastport.
So who would operate those, the smaller ones anyway?
So the thought is that the event tours group the company that's already in town that run those would be involved with those operations.
Okay. And all right. And just to point out again, I think one of the things that's, and maybe I'm just reading into the description too much, but the current language does say that the first phase of the project is the acquisition of the electric ferry boat and planning and preliminary engineering for infrastructure. But I feel like I think that a lot of those things depend on each other. So I can, to a certain degree, see why they're listed at the same time. But then again, back to my point is I think it's difficult to know exactly what infrastructure we need until we identify some of the needs at the drop-off points, if there are certain restrictions, but also on, that also depends on the type of boat, I suppose, and what kind of charging infrastructure we need for that. Is there anything you can contribute that would help clear up that, address some of my consternation on that?
Well, I think the basic electrical service will be pretty standard. Probably whatever the connector is to the boat may change, so that may be dependent on the type of boat. But I think that getting the power to a pedestal in the right location is going to be the key part, and then it could be altered by whatever type of boat it is, or whatever the connection that the boat requires would be.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so my last point and would be, just trying to address some of the public's concerns on this is, could we add to the appendix description, the CIP description, something akin to prior to finalizing the ferry and EV stops and prior to purchasing the associated EV infrastructure, there will be a public hearing for feedback, just something to make sure that the public can chime in. I think that will go a long way to making sure that they and also us, I think, that our voices can be heard through the process.
That's you guys'
City Manager.
call. That's not my call. That's you guys' call. That's a policy issue.
Are you proposing to add an amendment to this ordinance that we add in this, I guess it's at least one step, if not more steps? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, that is one of my amendments, which I'll get to later on. But for now, this is just adding in a sentence that says that there will be public hearings prior to finalizing the actual stops and before finalizing the ferry purchase and the associated EV infrastructure. I just feel like that could offer some pauses there for the public to chime in, so they can say, because it sounds like some of the concern from the public has to do with those potential stops, and this would give us an opportunity to explain to them that here are the areas we're thinking of, here are the improvements that would be needed, and same thing with the boat. There could be some kind of press release about here or or something introduced to the council that says, okay, here's, or a presentation to the council that says, here's the boat we're proposing to purchase and why. I think that will just help to insert some more transparency into this. So I guess my question is, do you see any concerns with that? Anybody?
If I could just weigh in, Chairwoman.
Of course.
So I think at least for the parking and traffic study, and probably for the consideration of options for locating the ferry on the Eastport side, that it's going to be absolutely essential to get public input on those, both of those. As far as which boat to buy, that's you all's call if you want to add that. That's not normally something that would go through public hearing, on a purchase like that. But certainly those other two, the traffic and parking study and the infrastructure decision making on where it's going to end up, are going to need public input.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to overthink this in the sense, we don't, when we purchase buses and things, those don't come to the council for any kind of deliberation or even the public, right? We green light certain purchases when we pass the budget. But those details are often provided in the budget in terms of the type of, be it a new dump truck or whatever needs to get purchased. And here we're just doing so without all of the details yet. So I don't know, if I'm the only one who has a little bit uncomfortable with it, then I'll shut up.
Alderwoman Pendel-Charles, did you have something to ask?
Yeah,
or
just something quick to add, Alderman Arnett had his hand up before me, Alderman Arnett, and then you put it down. Did you want to go before me?
Yeah, I just have a quick couple of statements. I'll get my crack tomorrow at Environmental Matters. I want to point out that all 9 of us are sponsors of this legislation. And I think that's because all 9 of us agree and believe that we need to move to electric. And I think that some of the confusion is being introduced because of the disconnect between the ordinance itself and the description in the CIP. The preponderance of the purchases are going to be for landside electric vehicles. Now, if we get from Jackie, we get some freebies from BG&E, that's great. That cuts down the cost. I think that something that I'm paying more attention to is fiscal 24 with a whole bunch of to be determines. And that's after we get through the grant phase and the pilot phase. And we really need to find out what this is going to cost us each year as part of operations. And that's where Alderwoman Finlayson and I think Alderman Gay for sure share a concern about how all of these things are going to eat into the funding for our primary transit system. And I think that we need to be, I want to be mindful of that kind of trade-off. All of these new things are great, and moving to electric is great, but we still have a primary transit system to run. I see Kurt here. Kurt is proposing that we not charge fees or fares for that primary transit system, which puts a little more pressure on the whole thing. I wish that the CIP had been written to feature more the landside electric vehicles of this procurement and less the boat. The boat is the new and novel thing. Electric landside transit has been around for a long time, the e-cruisers and the electric minibuses. But I think that we need to get some information, and City Manager Gerald has told us the 4-step plan, but we need to get some information during the budget process about what fiscal 24, because we're committing in 22 and 23 to something that has an unknown cost in the out years. And I think that's a very important concern that we need to pay some attention to. So those are my only observations. So thank you for the time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderwoman Hindell Charles, and then Alderman Gay.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, Mr. Gerald, I hate to be a prick. When you list those four, could you make the equity lens the fifth one, please? I like it designated as a fifth one. That would be wonderful. And I'm going to give a plug and a shout out here, and I'm going to make the connection. I had an extremely exciting tour of historic Annapolis, an American story that's we're going to all hopefully be at the grand opening next week. And this is something that our children will be thrilled about. Our adults, I think it's a great merging of our past and also looking towards our future and looking at our present when it comes to history. And this is certainly with the ferry, our water, a part of this proposal, that this would be a wonderful day for children to get on there, come over, have the tour of the museum and go back. And it would be an exciting day for our children. So those are my last two comments that I think I have on this matter today. So thank you so much, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you. Alderman Gay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I had 3 quick points. I think, Ross, you were spot on. I found the words that I was trying to make in the first go around as it relates to our existing transit route. And so my question is it possible to amend this ordinance to include a mention for the existing transit route, to include them in this? I don't see how it's not planned into 100% electric fleet when it's, it's our buses. It is transit. So I'm not sure how it's missing out on this opportunity to be included in that, even if it's over a 5 or 7 year period, understanding that there are a number of state and federal grants that would have to be gifted. But is that possible?
City Manager.
So keep in mind that this ordinance is all about putting this plan into the CIP. It's not looking holistically at transit. It's just saying we want to buy these new pieces of equipment and we want to put them into operation. And we need to consider all of the needs that this plan will have. That's all it is. It's a CIP. So it's not looking at the operations and maintenance costs down the road. We need to have that as part of the study to inform what this is going to look like. But this is strictly for the CIP project to add it to the FY22 as an amendment, the FY22 CIP. So there's a lot of other bigger picture items that you're talking about, Alderman Gay, that certainly need to be kept in mind. But this is just a CIP for this piece of new transit system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I'm still kind of lost. I don't want to take up too much time. This is not my committee, so I would hope to come back to that. And just tying in, I guess what you're saying is the bigger picture of transit. That would be great. My second question was, as I was looking at Appendix A, what would the maximum amount of people that could fit on a boat this size? And potentially they're talking about bringing boats on as well. It looks like it could fit, 5 to 8 people on, which is, I can imagine, a number of trips. That's like one family per trip.
City Manager, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think the number's more like a dozen, but maybe WC Manager Gavin now. It's a bigger number because when I wrote on it, it was a bigger number than 5 or 6. It was about a dozen, I think.
It's closer to a dozen. I believe it's a 10 to 12 max on that boat.
Okay. And then my last question, typically I don't always agree with the Planning Commission, but I did like the findings and the recommendations that they have made, in particularly as it relates to the removing lights from Church Circle. Has that been explored? Has the staff looked at the recommendations they've provided? I think it would make the most sense and also provide for more efficient transit opportunities, considering when you get to the Church Circle exit, oftentimes, especially if you're coming off of coming out of the garage, it's always backed up, but there's plenty of time for you to jump into the flow of traffic. There's never, too much traffic that it would be impossible. So has that been explored? And that's my last question.
The finding, yeah, I'm sorry. So the finding on the Church Circle lights had to do with the CIP project to replace those lights in Church Circle. It didn't have to do with this item. It was all about the replacement of those traffic lights on Church Circle because they wanted to minimize the number. When we go in and replace those historic lights on Church Circle with new lights, they wanted to try to minimize the number of light standards that are put back. It's a whole separate project.
Okay, it's included in this. I'm not sure if that was a mistake, but it does mention this plan.
Yeah, it was the same meeting that they heard both of those items.
Thank you. I think it's time, unless there's any other questions or comments, to move forward, and if we could have a motion to either favorably or unfavorably move this forward. Alderman Savage.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I wanted to bring up the one, before we do that, one amendment that I had emailed to the committee for discussion. I'm not 100% certain by, which is why I haven't asked the law to draft up anything. I wanted to get your thoughts. We touched on it a bit earlier when I brought up the idea. The amendment would basically just split this up into multiple phases. So for this year's amendment to the CIP, but for this year's amendment, it would be to the CIP, it would just be the study, the planning, preliminary engineering, feasibility study, and that would have a cost of $50,000 for the planning and feasibility study, and then $100,000 for the conceptual design of the docking facilities. And then the second phase, which would be the separate, for future budgets, would be including the initial steps of basically acquiring the ferry boat, the electric trolley, and all the docking and charging infrastructure. And just splitting those up into kind of two different things. The overall, the money is the same. I just split it up a little bit. And I kept a lot of the text that was introduced, but that kind of makes it a bit clearer in my head. But, if the committee, if it's not a concern to the committee, then, I'd like to know that as well.
I don't know where to go from that. Alderman Findell-Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Normally, Alderman Savage, I would agree with you, but in the case of the fact that we have a strategic, very strategic federal partner involved in this, I don't want to hamstring what the federal side may be able to do with us and lock us into something that we may regret later on. So with all due respect, I say we, for lack of a better phrase, full steam ahead, because that may interfere or thwart anything from the federal side.
Thank you.
What about you, Madam Chair?
So can I have a motion to recommend favorably to the City Council?
So moved. And we recommend favorably 04021.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Aye.
I'm looking at you. Sorry. All opposed? Any opposed? All right. Thank you.
So, all right. So I guess that means there was no interest in the amendment?
I think so. At least not at this point.
All right.
All right. Next up on our agenda, we have a report from Director Duwa.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I would like to take this opportunity to make a statement regarding my comments on the Transportation Board's report on free fare transit.
Thank you.
As you recall, at the February 9th, 2022 meeting of the committee, I was given the opportunity to discuss my comments on the report and answer any questions from the committee. At that meeting, I made it very clear that the Transportation Department does not make any recommendations for or against any proposal before the committee or City Council. And therefore, my comments on the report should not be considered as an opposition to or support for what the board is proposing. At that meeting, the Transportation Board presented its comments on my comments and determined that my comments on the report are, and to quote, nonsense, ridiculous, and or irrelevant, unquote. These are the words that the board chose to describe my comments on the report. I would like to make it crystal clear that I do stand by my comments and that they are not, and to quote, nonsense, ridiculous, and or irrelevant. At the same time, it is not my intent to engage in a war of words with the board, or for that matter, any person or group of persons. I strongly believe that any oral and or written discussions of matters before the committee must be done with civility and respect. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Pindell-Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Dew, I have a couple questions for you. Did you complete educational studies to complete a degree in a Bachelor of Science?
Yes, I did.
Did you do the same in a Master of Arts?
Yes, I did.
Did you do the same for a PhD?
Yes, I did.
Have you had 2 teaching experiences at 2 different universities, one in Canada and one in Pennsylvania?
Yes, I did.
Did you have 7 job-related trainings, all resulting in certifications?
Yes, I did.
Have you had 3 affiliations? 1, American Planning Association, 2, Community Transportation Association of America, and Transportation Association of Maryland?
Yes, I did.
Have you had 4 different professional publications published?
Yes, I did.
Have you had 4 unpublished research papers completed?
Yes, I did.
Do you have a 5.5-page resume of what you have accomplished over your professional career?
It's difficult to count the numbers of pages, but something like that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderwoman Pindell-Charles. Next up on our agenda, we have public testimony from Ms. Barbara Madison. Ms. Madison, I apologize for making you wait so long. Thank you for coming today.
It's not a problem. Thank you for letting me speak, Alderman O'Neill.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My community has a great deal of concern about the way the buses are being run right now. They're only open after 7 o'clock on Friday, Saturday. We live off of Riva Road. We have to connect to the regular buses from the county buses, which are the orange and which are the gold and yellow. The problem is with the way they're running the buses right now, no buses after 7 o'clock, Monday through Thursday, it's screwing us who are disabled and who are handicapped and who are seniors getting home from our doctor's appointments. Because sometimes our doctor's appointments are like in Glen Burnie and Baltimore City, and we don't get home till almost 7 o'clock at night. And some of us are in wheelchairs, like my husband. And he can't take a doctor's appointment at 2 o'clock in the afternoon like they want him to if we don't have a bus after 7 o'clock if it's all the way in Baltimore City for his appointment. The way the buses are being run right now is screwing my community. And I would like to know, when will we get our buses back? When will they start running properly so that we are not stranded and have no way home? It's expensive to pay for a taxi all the way from downtown Annapolis to Riva Road. It's almost $15 a taxi ride. One way. And if you're on disability or if you're on SSDI checks or SSI checks, you cannot afford $30 round trip for taxis to get home. So please, somebody tell me what is going on. When are we going to have our buses back? When can we rely on Annapolis Transit to ensure that we have a way home from our doctor's appointments without worrying about getting stranded with no way home, especially for those of us who are in wheelchairs? Can somebody answer this question? Because I am now frightened for my husband to come home because of how late his appointments can be. He has to get his appointments at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning and pray he gets there in time because the buses don't run after 7 o'clock Monday through Thursday.
Ms. Madison, I believe that Director Duah would like to comment.
Sure.
Please.
Can I ask one question first, Madam Chair?
Yes.
This one. Ms. Madison, what community do you live in?
I live in Claiborne.
Claiborne, is that behind Riva Festival?
Yes,
off of Riva
ma'am.
Road, but behind the Giant?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Madison. You did mention the River Road. Annapolis Transit no longer serves River Road.
I know this, but we connect to your Annapolis Transit to get home and to get to our doctor's appointments. But if you're not running them after 7 o'clock, that screws us to connect back to our transportation to get home because we're stranded downtown Annapolis after 7 o'clock.
Let me address that. During the pandemic, because of reduced ridership, we did actually reduce service. The 2 or 3 services that were reduced or were not running were the orange route and then the purple north and south. The purple north and south during the weekdays are run from 7 p.m. to about 11 p.m. We are restoring the services. We have restored the orange route. I did talk to the operations manager. Our intent is to look at the ridership because we do have an experiment going on with that on Friday evening. So far, for the Friday evening purple ridership, the numbers are not encouraging, but it's our intent to bring it back beginning July 1st.
So basically, we have to wait till July to get our buses back and so we're going to have to worry about him, my husband in a wheelchair, making it home in time because you're not putting the buses back until July. Is that what you're telling me?
What I'm telling you is that based upon the ridership that we have on the purple on Fridays, the plan is to bring it back at the beginning of the fiscal year.
So basically, it's going to still screw my husband till July.
Ms. Madison, I believe that I can refer you to our constituent services and see if we can come up with an alternate solution.
Ms. Madison, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Madison, how many residents in Claiborne Place would you say are affected similarly as you?
About 60% of my residents. Because I
Which is
used to,
about how many people? Which is about how many people?
probably 100.
100 people. Okay.
And there's
As our
175 families in the family. There's 175 families in our building.
So our chairperson, Alderwoman O'Neill, indicated that she's going to possibly look at the city and see what maybe we can do between now and then. It might also require some kind of coordination with the county transit as well. I don't know. I'm not a transit expert, so I can't say. But we're talking 100 people. Have you all possibly signed or written a letter and signed it to give us a good, we hear you now, but to give us kind of a more concise problem in writing? That might be very helpful.
I'm working on that right now.
Okay, that would be even better. And Alderwoman O'Neill, our chairperson, is there, should she send it to you or to whom?
Yes, please. And I will make sure that it gets sent to our constituent services so that we can get back to you. And Alderman Gay has a question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Chair. Just quickly, and Ms. Madison, I'm very familiar with the Claiborne area and know that it is true a large number of the residents there rely on public transportation, whether it be taxis or the school or the buses. Also, I would add, I worked at the Department of Aging and Disability for a little, and we provided vouchers for services, it definitely for medical appointments. And so as the older woman, the chair has suggested, I'm sure that our Office of Community Services would be able to pair you with the Department of Aging and get you some vouchers so that if you can't take the bus, you can have direct pickup or a taxi voucher. So
I have talked to them about the taxi voucher. They're fading it out because not many taxis take it anymore. There's only 2 taxis that take the taxi vouchers because I have talked to them before on this about a month ago. And they said that only 2 taxis are accepting them right now. So they're fading out the taxi vouchers because there's only 2 taxis taking them right now, when there used to be like 10.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
And Department of Aging does offer transportation, but they do not pick up anybody after 1:30 up in Baltimore City, and they do not pick up anybody in Glen Burnie after 1:30 because they have to do dialysis patients after 1:30 because they close at 4:30.
Thank you. We will definitely be in touch, Mrs. Madison. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one quick comment. I just look at the county yellow line. It does actually end service at 7 p.m., just like a regular service.
Yellow service does not pick up after 5:30 over at the mall.
Okay. We'll make note of that. Thank you very much.
And the gold does not drop off at Claiborne. It drops off in front of the Target on Forest Drive. And that is like a 10-15 minute walk from the bus stop to our house, to our apartment complex. And that is not easy walk for those of us who use canes and walkers. And at least 50 to 60% of the people in my building use canes and walkers.
For the record,
I understand about the target distance, yes.
Just for the record, Annapolis Transit does not operate the gold or the yellow anymore since I believe 2018. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Going on to the next item on our agenda. We have a report from Transportation Board Chair Kurt Riegel. Kurt, thank you very much
Madam
for your
Chairman.
patience.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Thanks very much. I'm happy to have an opportunity to speak with you. The first thing I'd like to do is to give you a very brief update on what the Transportation Board has been doing. During the past year, we had two major initiatives. One is one that I would call is very small caliber, important but small, and that was our recommendation concerning bicycles on sidewalks. Both the county and the city responded to our recommendations with legislation that cured a problem that we thought was small but important. You also, in a resolution, made a recommendation to the state government that the default setting with respect to bicycles on sidewalks be reversed. That has resulted in legislation introduced by Dana Jones. It is now before the legislature, and we will see how it fares. I'm hopeful that it will be passed and this item will be behind us. That's the small but nevertheless important thing. The larger thing is our recommendation to you that you do everything in your power to see that Annapolis joins the nationwide trend to convert to fare-free transit. If you'll remember our principal argument, there are many arguments, but the principal argument was that you and the federal government and the state government are already paying 93% or so of the cost. And for a very small additional percentage, you could go whole hog, bite the bullet, and get a lot of people on the bus. Buses which now too often run empty. We feel that this is the simplest, cheapest, fastest way of enhancing the effectiveness of the Annapolis transit system right now. And then the final thing with respect to our activities is that we are looking again at our own priorities for work that might result in recommendations to you during this calendar year, and we'll be coming back to you on that. Now I'd like to turn briefly to the subject which occupied most of your time today, and that is the 100% electric proposal, which is before the council. I regret that we did not prepare for you in time for your discussions today our recommendation concerning that legislation, and I think we will probably do so in advance of consideration by the full city council. But I just want to give a few informal thoughts before we get to that point. This appears to be, the proposal before you, if I understand it correctly, is for about $1.4 million of program activity, which is to be split up in ways that are somewhat imperfectly understood now between city contributions and grant contributions. As I understand it, this would fund the first phase of capital acquisition of electric vehicles, notably the electric boat, but it is silent on the very large and continuing costs of operations and maintenance, personnel costs, maintenance costs, all electric charging infrastructure costs, all of which are major items and are of concern for the long term. To the extent that those costs will be borne by grants, of course, that's wonderful. Everybody likes free money. And I hope that the city can fund as much of this as possible. 100% would be a nice number. But I caution you, as you make a commitment to this project, in particular the electric boat project, that you not put a lien on city funds that would damage the overall transit system of the city of Annapolis. Our recommendations do speak to the full system. I see no analysis in what has been presented to you so far concerning how many people would be served not much on where those people live in the city. And my somewhat fuzzy impression is that the numbers are small relative to the full system, and that the region served is relatively small compared to the full system. So we will be making recommendations, and I ask you to consider in the future what the impact of this particular project is going to be relative to what you can do for all Annapolis. That's all I have to say at this point. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. The next item on our agenda, are there any more questions, comments, or good of the order? Right, the next item on our agenda is adjournment.
Move we
can I have a motion to, what's that?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Very good. Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned at 5:45 p.m. And I thank you for your extra time tonight.